When I first thought of this idea of asking Rabbi Levene, having the chutzpah to ask Rabbi Levene the Sunday before Pesach to speak, it is after all the Yahrzeit of his grandfather Zatzal. There were people that said to me, "You're crazy. Who on the Sunday before Pesach is ever going to come to listen to a presentation?" I'm glad to be proven correct. And it's a tribute to Rabbi Levene Zatzal, but it's certainly as much, if not more, of a tribute to Rabbi Levene Shlita, that there is such a turnout. There's obviously an enormous amount that could and should be said about Reb Aryeh Levin Zatzal. Yerushalayim was always a city that had many great people, but the idea that only one man was the tzaddik of Yerushalayim gives you some sense of who the great Reb Aryeh Levin was. And I have to say, thanks to Rebbetzin Levine, I managed to get my hands on some footage, I don't know if it's contraband, but from many, many years ago of our Rabbi Levine speaking in Baltimore about his Zayda. It must be a video from 25 years ago, and just watching that video was so inspiring. There is nobody in the whole world who is amongst us that knew Rabbi Levine, the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, like our Rabbi Levine. Our precious Rabbi Levine, the Tzaddik of Balakinwood. It's not just that he knew who his grandfather was, but he was mishamish his grandfather in the most meaningful of ways. He had the opportunity to sleep together with him in the same room, to study Torah with him, to walk the streets of Yerushalayim with him, to glean insight not only into the finer, nuanced points of halacha, but into what it means to be a dedicated Jew, to what it means to be a human being, to what it means to be a tzaddik. And so, without further ado, it's my pleasure to call upon Tzaddik of Balakinwood to speak of the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim.
Hello, Marion.
When you receive smicha, you usually receive it from another Rav, right? I received now my tzidkas diploma from a tzaddik. That fulfills the biblical dictum, right? Tzedek, tirdoif. Chase away the two tzaddikim. I hope after this is over you won't chase them both out. Certainly not Rabbi Schmidt. Maybe me, I can believe that. It's a great joy for me to just see all your wonderful faces. It's a oases in the desert, many at one time. There's all the faces that my heart or my neshama misses and longs for and thinks about and have turned into zechroinus almost. But thank God you're really here. I always comment that when you meet someone that you knew in your childhood or your youth, and you see them after many, many years, there is an automatic response where you hug them and you're excited and you talk about the old days and everything else. I met such a person once, and we were both so excited to see each other, and we talked, and then when we left, we had a wonderful conversation. When we left, I realized we didn't even like each other. At the time when we knew each other, some 30 or 40 years before, we couldn't take each other, you know? So I said, what happened here? The strange metamorphosis of time, how did all this happen? And then I realized what it was, you know. Time is the lens of time is a marvelous and magnificent thing. It's much greater than the telescope or the microscope. It's an amazing Hubble of the neshama. Zikaron, Malchus, Zechroinus, and Shofars. In the end, we turn everything into Zechroinus. And when we see a person that we haven't seen in many years, we sort of forget how we were at that stage, and we begin to doubt, was I ever that person? You know, a lot comes in between there, a lot of layers that have accrued over the years, and we wonder, was there ever truly such a person as I faintly remember as myself when young? And this person validates it. Yes, there really was such a person. He validates the fact that we were once young, and we were here, and we lived our lives, and they really happened. These things really happened, because things that happen vanish so quickly. Sometimes, though, they remain, because the zichronos are very, very strong. And this is a perfect example. So when I see all of your faces, you validate my 40 years with you, and it's a great, at least with some of you, and all the many years with the rest, it validates the fact that you were here. And I can especially say that with each and every one of you, I remember our past. When I walk away from it, I say, oh, what a wonderful relationship we did have. And what a wonderful relationship we do have. And what a wonderful relationship in musician we should all have for many, many years in the future. I want to thank Rabbi Schmidman. I thank you for everything. The Mord Aser gives me rishus to say a few words. It's not an easy thing to speak about a Zeta. I always found it very hard. In our family, we were very reticent about that. Somebody came once, and you want to sit down? Nice place to sit. Shouldn't have to stand.
He's good for me.
The seats available. I was, oh, maybe there aren't. Right. In our family, we were always very, very reticent. A friend of mine came when I was sitting Shiva in the Shnei for my father, and he said, "I'm paying you back now, because when I went to yeshiva with you," he said, "there were everybody, anyone who was a Rebbe She'enikol, anyone who had some yichud, we all talked about it, and they talked about it, and they said, this is the Enikol, this was it, and you were a nice guy, you were an easygoing fellow, and everything else." He said, one of the chevra, he says, "But I didn't know." He said, "I came after all the years, I came to Eretz Yisrael, and I met your uncle." He met one of my uncles, and he said, "Now I was zoicha to be near to him." And then he said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, "From Philadelphia." He said, "Oh my goodness," he said, "do you know that I have a nephew in Philadelphia?" So he said, "Who is your nephew?" He said, "It couldn't be that Levine that went to yeshiva with me." He said, "Why?" He said, "Because everybody always talked about it." He never said anything. He never talked about it. He never talked about it. That was a very gross thing to do. My Baba had a yichus brief. I tell the story many, many times. And someone asked her, where is the yichus brief? She said she needed it to light the stove with. And so they said, "How could you do such a thing?" She says, "Why?" She said, "If I am zoiche, so I am zoiche on my own schus," he said. "And if I'm not zoiche," she said, "Favos dafir Hashem and the elder," and he says, "Why should I embarrass the people who came before?" You know, this by us, the Kotzker always says, yiches is a null, it's a zero. If you have something to put, it becomes exponential to put before it. But if not, it's just a nothing. What does it mean on its own? It's what you do with your life that counts, and how you carry things forward. My Zeta was an exceptional person. Since, the secret is out, people know that it was my Zeta. I can talk about him a little bit, but it's a very emotional experience for me. It's always an emotional journey. I go back in time, and it's my zichronos. Validates a past that I sometimes really question, was it ever there? And I say, well, it must be, because everything that I've ever done that is positive, the few things, are all based and rooted in that zikaron, in that memory, that which has become a memory to me. In the Gemara in Shabbos, we begin always with the Gemara Marove, right? The Rachim Rabbanan, Havaloi, Banin Rabbanan, Nin Rabbanan, the Moike Rabbanan, Havaloi, Chasnavusa Rabbanan, right? Means the Dochil Merabbanan, Hu Gufe, Heavy Mitzvah Merabbanan. And the ilav ba'ache, who, right? Mishtamin milei kitsurvim rabbanon. Rava said, who loves the chachamim, the rabbis, will have sons who are rabbis. He who honors the rabbis will have rabbis for sons-in-law. He who stands in awe of the rabbis will himself be a rabbinical scholar. But if not fit for this, his words will be heeded like those of a rabbinical scholar. You know, I wish that were true. And it is true. I've seen it in other people. I've seen it happen very, very frequently. My dad was a man who always honored Chachamim. That was the basis of everything that we learned as children. To honor Talmidei Chachamim, love of Talmidei Chachamim. We always venerated people who were B'nai Torah and Talmidei Chachamim. That was considered a tremendous value in our family. And you sat before them with the greatest of respect and with the greatest of kavod, and you were shoyse batzom as devreim. You drank in their words. You sat at their feet. Chachamim, we were taught to love them from the earliest times, and that's why, thank God, Baruch Hashem, Chachamim continue to grow, because the schusim of being close to Chachamim teach us a lot. The schus of being close to Talmidei Chachamim is a wonderful, wonderful schus. And if you have that, take full advantage of it. That's one thing I did take advantage of in my life. I was taught by my parents to respect and to love Talmidei Chachamim. That was my Zayda. My Zayda was a man who loved and respected Talmidei. More than that, he appreciated Talmidei Chachamim. But his love for Talmidei Chachamim somehow, his cup overflowed. And somehow that love of Talmidei Chachamim, of B'nai Torah, spilled over, and it encompassed all of those with whom he came into contact. He was a great lover of humanity, but he was a tremendous pragmatist. He felt to understand this. He was very clever and very, very shrewd. And he taught lessons in amazing ways. And those are the things I learned from him that are really very personal and private. And those are my zichronos that are very dear to me, the things that I shared. And I will share a few of them with you today because they're very meaningful to me. They're lessons of life. We decided, my Zayda decided that we should have a Mussar Seder in the yeshiva. And my alma mater, Yeshiva's Beis Aryeh, when I learned there, it was a very, very small yeshiva it was. In my Zayda's chotzer upstairs in Mishkenes. And there were about 15 younger light. I was there only because of nepotism, because I was an anical, and I told my Zayda, I want to learn here. And I was the youngest, but you know there were names there that many of them are now in the Yeshiva Shomala in Solangiyar. The Rabbi Yashiv's older Reb Shlomo Yashiv was one of the Talmidim. My uncle Reb Simcha Shlomo, Zichronim Levracha. There Chashmal Halacha, and the Rebbe was Reb Lezer Plachinsky. My uncles, all those they were all great people, and I was zeicha to be in that yeshiva. I didn't realize at the time but I didn't fully realize the impact of being together with those people. They were amazing and wondrous people, and my dad decided that 15 minutes a day, everyone should learn Mussar. Okay, so what happened? He came up with Mussar Sfarim. Now, of course, in those days there was no art scroll and there was no Birnbaum, and they had some old Sfarim, and he brought up gathered together all the Mussar Sfarim that were in his house, and he brought them up. So some of them were in better condition, in worse condition. There was like one or two of each, and there weren't a lot, and they weren't all uniform. So of course all the older Bachrim, which was everybody else, they all, and Yungalite, they all went, and they got first dibs. So one got a Misal Yesharim, another got a Rochet Tzadikim, all got the rights for him. By the time it came to me, I was at the very end there. I was at the end of the fish, so I got the tail. What did I get? There was only one little sefer left. I forgot to bring, I should have brought it. One little sefer was left. It was a little Mussar sefer that I'd never heard of before, and I haven't seen very much since. It had a couple of little Mussars for him pasted together, and and it didn't have a cover, and so my Zayda said, "Well, this is your Musa Sefer. You'll learn 15 minutes a day." I said, "But Zayda," I said, "it doesn't have a cover." So he said, "Mr. Machen, Tovlin," he said, "You'll make a cover." He said, "It doesn't have a cover, so they isn't that an invitation to make a cover?" I said, so I took that to heart, and I took that little sefer. I want to tell you, that sefer is so chashuv to me. I learned how to bind books because of that sefer. Every year, okay, I learned how to bind it better, and I kept rebinding that little sefer, and today it's bound very nicely. I must say that much I will pat myself on the back. I did a very nice job, and it's a beautiful little sefer, and it has, most importantly, the notations of my Zayda on the side, little statements, little things on the side, and it's a fascinating sefer, and you won't believe this, but much of it is all in rhyme. It rhymes, yeah, it appeals to the poetry. So it's a wonderful little sefer that I treasure very, very much. But the lesson was the Vismachem Tovlet. This was a tremendous trait that I learned from my Zayda. They asked my father, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, Avimayri, to write something, or they gave an interview after my Zayda passed away, and to explain what he thought was the Yahrzeit, one of the Yahrzeitis of my Zayda's mahus, his being. And this is what he said. He said, my father, he said, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, never liked new things. You would bring something new, you would bother him terribly. He says, this is nishmir. It's not me. His whole life he lived in what we would call poverty in terms of material things. It's not me. And he would get a new thing. He always was neat and clean and presentable, very fastidious about how he went out. He always presented himself in a very beautiful and fine fashion. But it wasn't a fashionable fashion. But everything was neat, everything was clean. So my father once said to him, Tata, he says, why is it that you only like things which are old? You don't like new things. Why is that? He says, we all love a new suit, a new thing. So my Zayda said, you don't understand. He said, when you deal with new things, you always have to be careful not to make them dirty. When you deal with a new thing, you have to always be careful not to spoil it. Don't dirty a new suit, don't spoil a new this. But he says, when you have old things, he says, then you're always involved in making them better and finer and cleaner. He said. And then my father said that was in the kuda of his nature. You see people, your intention is to change people, to make them better. It's just like you, right? And then I always say about the people that say, I want you to become much better. How? Just like me. Yeah. So I'm always reminded of, and there I saw a monkey, just like me. That's the biggest monkey of all, is the one that tries to make people over in their own image. The Rabbi Shalom makes over in his image, Kaviyachal, he tells us about it, and we are pretty far away. But making over in your image, what you do is you accept people for who they are. You're not judgmental of people. Just the opposite. You look for the schlusim in people. Well, we know many great people do that. But the beauty of it is to find the schlusim in a person. And the beauty of it is not to try and change a person, because what a person is up to that person, that's their bechira. And how you respond to that person is your bechira, and your response should be such to strengthen the other person's bechira, and that's a very important point. So that's why you never are judgmental of others. Your judgmental behavior, you say this is bad behavior, this is poor behavior, but never judgmental of the person, because you don't know. Only the Eibishter can judge a person truly and know what the kavanas of a person are. And this, I think, was a light to every encounter that he had with everybody. It takes a tremendous amount of love and caring and a tremendous strength of character to be able to do this with people. Because to keep yourself like this always and to hold back from judgmentalism is an extremely difficult thing, especially with people who are so different. And yet to be able to do this and to be able to take every person as they are, love them as they are, accept them as they are, try to change them. You have the right to change other people and the ability to do so. But that is your behavior, that's your bechira. The way that you behave changes others, or doesn't. But that's up to you. And that has to do with your own involvement with yourself. So it takes a tremendous amount of self-involvement and a tremendous amount of tolerance and a tremendous amount of patience to be able to do this. Also, everything has a worth and a value. I learned that lesson too. When I was born, my Zeta, first thing he did was he went over to the most famous Sefer in Yerushalayim at the time. He was known as the most famous Sefer in Yerushalayim, Reb Nisanel Sefer. Today, Reb Nisanel Sefer's tefillin are worth yakris, they're a treasure. And when he wrote tefillin, you never had to inspect them because he was maftiach. He promised that they would never get spoiled. I had my tefillin checked. Right? 50 years later, after the bar mitzvah, and they were perfect, amazing. And something happened before, and that's why I had them checked. I wouldn't have had them checked because of that, and they were perfect. It was amazing. Reb Nisanel Sefer's tefillin. So he had Reb Nisanel Sefer's tefillin. Immediately he had set aside for me. I should have tefillin. Those tefillin were worn in this. My father, when he came to America in the Second World War, it was during the time of the Second World War. So of course something happened with his tefillin. So he wore my tefillin until after the war he was able to get his own tefillin repaired in Eretz Yisrael, and then I received mine for my bar mitzvah. So not only were they my Zayd that bought me those tefillin, but my father wore them as well. Over the years, number of years passed, and 10, 15 years passed, and the outer casings of the tefillin, of the batim, were already a little bit worn, and they were coming apart as they did. They made them out of cardboard in those days. Right? Now they make them out of plastic, and they pollute the streams and the rivers and destroy the world. But in the olden days, they didn't make them out of machablim. They made them out of cardboard, out of recyclables. They were green. In the old days, the film covers were green. So what happened? They deteriorated. So I said to my Zayda, I went to Eretz Yisrael. I said, Zayda, I said, I need new covers for the film. So he said, give it to me. I gave it to him. And he said, fine. He said, I want to see what the size is. Before I left, he said, I fixed the film covers. Here they are. He gave me back the film. It was the same film covers. But he stuck them together with gummed paper, and he put some tape on the other side. I said, Zayda, I said, I didn't know you were, I would have done that. I said, he said, why would you throw this out? You still have a lot of good use of it. I want to tell you a story. Because of that, Al Hayom Hazeh, I'll show you sometime when I put on film. I have the same covers for my tefillin. I fixed them already so many times I can't count already. I've lost count. But I refixed them, and much better than they were fixed by my Zayda in the first place. He wasn't as fastidious in this as I was, because I was doing something that my Zayda taught me. He taught me that if you can still use a thing and it's still usable, and it's still something that can serve you, you don't get rid of things easily. And there's a great danger in that, because you know what our houses have become, as all of us are divesting ourselves of all the nechosim that weigh upon our shoulders, that become a rechayim, a millstone around our neck. But what to do with all of this stuff that we've gathered? But the point is, he didn't gather a lot of stuff, but the thing that he had He was very fastidious. If you can use a thing, don't waste it. No. Somebody told me, one of my Zayda's old Yedidim, he told me this. He said he remembers my Zayda. I'll tell you who it was. Actually, as a matter of fact, it was Reb Yitzchak Siegel, who was for many years, he was the honorary president of the Agudas Rabbanim, was a Rav in Jersey City, great man, and he was one of the oldest Rabbanim in America. And he told me that he remembered my Zayda as a young man, as a boy, in the yeshiva in Halusk by Reb Baruch Ber, and he said he remembers that he most vividly that before Shabbos on Thursday, he would see my Zayda running around just dressed in his talus cotton and in his undershirt, and he would be running up and down in the freezing weather. And he said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "Because I need a pink shirt for Shabbos." He had one shirt, so he used to wash it in the river Erev Shabbos, and that's what he would put on. But until it dried out enough for him to put it on, he ran up and down to keep himself warm. That was. So he said, my Zayda said to him at the time. He told me, he said, "I remember this young boy running up and down." This man was almost 90 years old. When he came back, he went on a visit to Eretz Yisrael when he was about 85 with his wife. And this is what he told me. He said, "I saw your Zayda, it's a chazege eltert." He said, he became so old. He said, "I remember him still in Alusk. He was a young boy. And I remember," and that's what he told me the story. He was running up and down. He said, so he said to my Zayda, "But aren't you called?" He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "It's wonderful. I'm being Mekayim a lot of things." He said, "What are you being Mekayim?" He said, "I'm fulfilling," he says, the mitzvah of Chiluch Atzomois. I'm doing good exercises meanwhile, and I'm getting my shirt to dry L'Kovet Shabbos, and I'm doing wonderful things. Let me just tell you this. This is all written down, but it just to note. My Zayda was born on Vav Nisan 1885. Okay, Kafim Yonam, as he would say, and he was married on the 11th of Tammuz, 1905. Came to Eretz Yisrael a few years before. Okay? Now, from that period of time, he was a young man, very young man. From 1885, during that period of time, until his bar mitzvah, he was in Orla. He went to Narevke, that's where he learned Chumash with an uncle, with my Zayda's with his father's older brother, Benjamin Benish's older brother in Orla. Then he went to Narevke to a yeshiva. Then he went to Brisk. Then he went to Fahust, to Pruzhina, his Rebellia Pruzhina, he learned it, to Slonim, to Volozhin, to Minsk, to Slutsk, and from there to Eretz Yisrael. And he came to Eretz Yisrael when he was before 20, in his early 20s. So look at all these different places that he was. He was Goylel and Koim Torah. He ran to all these different places before. Lived in shuls, slept in shuls at night. You know, there's a famous story that I'm sure many of you read it, where he was a little boy, and the way that it worked in that town, that was in Slutsk actually, every yeshiva bacher had a balabos for one day of the week. They were very poor yeshiva, so one day a week, one of the balabatim would undertake to feed them a meal or two. So he was missing 2 days. He always said, "I remember Slutsk, I missed 2 days." Missed 2 days. He didn't have a balabos for 2 days. So 2 days he missed food. So he was very hungry. He was lying and where did he sleep? He slept in shul. Shul, they called it the Hegdish. That's where the Achnas Asorchim people slept in the shul, and the Beis Medrash, and all the poor people and the beggars, they all slept in the shul. And the yeshivalites slept in the shul. He was a little boy. And, I guess the younger you were, the further away you were from the great oven that heated up these buildings. older people, they got to be near the Avim, but the others were far away. So he slept on a bench by the ender, and he was trying to fall asleep, and the beggars were talking business, they were talking about where are the good places to go, and where they treat them well, where they throw them out, where they don't throw them out. So he said, suddenly one of them said, were you ever by Rabbi Yom Benish, who lives right outside of Ola? Oh, they all started. He is a wonderful man. Oh, he's not a very wealthy man. He's a forester. That's what he did. My elder Zayda was a forester. Can you believe it? He used to chazir mishnayos soisen veidik when he went and took care of the forest. And he made less than any of the other foresters. Everybody knew. He was the most erlich of all the foresters, and he took the least pay because he didn't think he deserved that much. So he would take care of his work, and when he retired, he could no longer do this, so he lived in this little town, this little village, and times were very difficult. But when people came to stay there, whenever a poor man came in, they would do anything they could. Whenever there was food, they would give it to them. They would sleep on the floor, and they would give them their bed. They were extremely balei machnisei orchim. They brought in people. They were caring to people, and extremely accommodating to all of these poor people, no matter who they were. As they were talking, my Zayda heard all this. Suddenly he started to cry. He says, "That's his father." So he said, "Why? Why are you crying?" So he said, "Because you're talking about my father." He said, "Rabbi Yom Benish, your son?" He said, "Yes." "So why are you crying?" He said, "You miss home?" He said, "No." He says, "Because," he says, "my father, you said how nice he is to all of you." He says, and I'm missing 2 days of eating because I don't have a balabas. All the poor people, they got furious. Yom Benish's son, so they all got together in the middle of the night. They all marched together, the protest march, to the Rav. By the time they banged on the door, and they said, "What kind of a zoim is this? That the son of Ben Yom Ben," and because of the poor people, my Zayda got the 2 balabatim that he needed for the rest of the week. They said he was always thankful to the poor people all the years that they were mishtadel for him. They stood up for him when he really needed it. Now, it was a very wonderful symbiotic relationship because he did the same thing. You see, or as we always say, the old proverb, one hand washes the other. Baruch Hashem, you learn what you are inculcated with and what life gives you, and the way that you deal with it are the most wondrous and marvelous lessons. And these are wonderful lessons that I learned. You learn lessons from how a person acts. I treasure these small lessons that I learned just from observation, which were very dear and special to me. I told the story. They quoted it in a newspaper, but they got it all wrong. Not long ago, and so I want to correct it. I told people I wanted to stay up one night and see what my Zayda does when I was his roommate for a period of time after my Baba was nifta, Zechron Levracha. So I stayed with him, and I wanted to see what does he do in the middle of the night. So he came home very late, and I slept during the day. I took a nap in order to be able to be up at night and pretend I was sleeping, and I was watching what he was doing. Came in late at night, and he walked over to the table. He ate supper. What was supper? Supper was a little piece of herring there he ate, and with a piece of bread, and he drank some tea, and he left over most of it. But he benched. The benching took much longer than the eating, and then he benched. After he benched, he opened up a mishnayos, and they didn't have electricity then, so he turned up the kneit mashinkala, that's what they called it, the little kerosene lamp, and he started to learn mishnayos. So he learned. Then he looked at, oh my, time for Tikkun Rachel, Tikkun Leah. It's time for Chatzos, midnight. Mourn for Yerushalayim. So he's saying the tefillos that you say in the middle of the night, and that passes. And he opens up a sefer, starts saying Tehillim. Said a little bit of Tehillim, And then he fell asleep at the table. I saw he dozed off. He must have dozed off. By my watch, by my calculations, he dozed off maybe for about an hour or so. And by this time, it was already getting towards morning. Not yet, but getting towards morning. Roused himself suddenly. And he hadn't even laid down in bed. And he went over and he lit the lamp. And he washed that Wasser, and he lit the lamp. And he said, some broches. Then he went over and he took out of the cabinet a Viewmaster. You know what a Viewmaster is? You remember those 3D Viewmasters? Somebody gave me that Viewmaster for my bar mitzvah. And with it, they gave me the pictures of the Koisel, of the Beis HaMokem HaMikdash, of the Evan. You see all the wonderful things that some of them that you never could go near because you couldn't go on the Arabais. And all of these pictures that were there, right there in front of you, it looked real. So I showed it to my Zayda. He said, this is wonderful. He got so excited. He said, I'm living here and I can't go, and you came all the way. You brought me to Koisel again. You couldn't go in those days to the Koisel. It was in the Jordanian hand. So he was so excited, but so I gave it to him. I said, this is wonderful. What do you think? So he said, good. He said, that's a wonderful matana. He went over and he took it out of the cabinet and he turned up the light and he's looking at the Mokem Mikdash. And he's saying, Sheyabona Beis HaMikdash Be'er Yameinu. Sheyabona Beis HaMikdash Be'er Yameinu. And very excited, very nisragish, very emotional. And he looked at that picture for about 5 minutes, I would say. And then suddenly he put it down and he said, no, genug olam hazeh. Enough of the joys of this world. He went to the movies for 5 minutes. He looked at the wall. We would take this as a sacred act, you know. My father used to always laugh. He would say that, you know, nowadays, he says, a young man came to him. I just heard a drasha of my father's that I had recorded. And he said, nowadays, he says, people have become very observant. And this was in the 50s yet. He said, they haven't become really that observant. He said, the people have become very observant. He said, a man came to me and he said to me, he said, Rabbi, your drasha, I was here last Yom Kippur. And your drasha made a tremendous impact on me, and I want you to know that since I'm a busy man, but since then I've done a lot of my Yiddishkeit has grown. He said, really? He said, what have you done? He said, well, I did so many different things. He said, first of all, he said, I want you to know, Rabbi, he says, I went to see the 10th man. I went to see the 10 Commandments. He said, I did a lot of wonderful things. He said, and I bought the Kol Nidri of Perry Como. And he did all these wonderful, I heard Hava Nagila by Harry Belafonte. Wonderful things, you see. But this was an other Welt, another world. My Zayda looked for 5 minutes at the picture of the Kaisel, how wonderful it was, and he said, enough oilam hazeh. Now this is very interesting because that's when he started his daily rounds. What was his daily work? Every day, my Zayda would walk all the way, he would get dressed at that point, it's still dark, and he would walk all the way to Ornstein's Heiser, which was quite a ways. And he would go to the mikveh. Then from there, he would walk to Zarei Chama. That was the shul that davened. It was the highest point in the new city. That's the shul that davened. They had a sundial on the roof. And the shamus would go up, and it would say, Stupzach, morning, Barkai, and that's when they would start Tfilah, Shmon Esrei. So he would daven every day. He was one of the regulars at Zarei Chama. That was his davening. And then he would walk through the shuk, and he would always tell wonderful stories about people he would meet at that time of the day. Remember, once he told me a wonderful story. These were little ancillary special gifts that he would give. He told me, he said that there was a Yid that he told us to the whole family. I remember we were sitting one Shabbos. He said there was a man, a shoemaker, a Yemenite shoemaker, a Taimani. He said, and he would, every day, he said, he would see him sitting there, and he was the earliest one in the shuk, in Machne Yehuda. He was the earliest one to get up in the morning. He was always open. Whenever you went by, he was always open. I guess it was in those days, it was the equivalent of a 24-hour shoemaker. You know, he invented 20, you think it was invented here? He invented it. So he was a 24-hour shoemaker, and he always was sitting there. But he always sat, when he was not doing the his shoe repair, he would sit with a sefer. One day, so my Zayda would stop and say good morning, and they would talk to each other. One day he said to my Zayda, he said, since he saw him so many times, and they became good friends, he said, he would like to invite my Zayda, he said, I'm making today a siyum. Would you come into my... I said, push it to person, the simple man, a shoemaker. So my Zayda went. He went. So he said, they came in, he figured, what was he making a siyum on? Maybe on Mishnayos, or maybe on a Seder of Mishnayos, but he couldn't imagine what. He came in, and he said, the man made a siyum on Shas. He said, this man sitting there, he said, do you know what you have here in Yerushalayim? Nobody even knows a quiet, unassuming man, a shoemaker. And he makes siyums. It was a beautiful siyum. He said, it was beautiful, he said, beautiful malitzas, wonderful things, wonderful drushes. He said, my Zayda said, I never looked at a shoemaker, he said, in the same way again. He said, it changed my whole view. He said, who knows what a person is? Hey? He said, and then I said to myself, he told me this, he said, Rabbi Yochanan Asadler was not a shoemaker. So here you are, that's your answer, you see. You never know what a person is. And to discover what a person really is a marvelous thing. That was an adventure there. To discover the discovery of what a person really is. There was another very important trait that I learned. And that was, when a thing becomes very popular, he always stayed away from it. Why? For a very simple reason. Because there was always someone else to do the job. He said, if I went to the prisons, he started to go to the prisons because he heard there was no one going. There was no one doing anything. So he started to go to the prisons, to visit prisoners. It wasn't a fashionable thing to do. Nobody had done it. They didn't have an official chaplain under the Turks and under the British. They didn't have an official chaplain. My Zayda went. And that's how he got involved with all this whole business of the merit and the whole thing. Because there was no one else to do the job. So he went for many years, and there's a fascinating story that precedes this. I read it in one of the books. Fascinating story. When my Zayda first decided to do these things and to help people and to do ma'asim of chesed, he had a great question in his mind. He said, if I start doing these kind of things, I'll become very busy and I'll get involved with people. Social action. He says, and I won't spend the time learning. So he said, so it will take away from my learning. So he said, so I don't know what to do. Should I do this or should I be sitting and learning instead? So he went to ask his mechutin, who later became his mechutin, who was very dear to him, like his Rebbe, well, one of his Rabbeim, and that was the Leshem. Reb Shlomo Elyashu was the biggest Baal Kabbalah in Yerushalayim at the time, and he was later. That's his son married my Zayda's daughter, my aunt, and so he went to ask him an eitzah what to do. He would go to him every night. He said, "What should I do?" So this is what the Leshem told him, and it's a wonderful lesson for all of us. It guided my life. He said to him the following. He said, it was so logical. He said, Amalek Zeiten, he said, Ich bin nicht kein Navi. He said, I'm not a Navi, there are no Naviim today. He said, in the olden days, people could always foretell the future. You went either to the Kohen and he looked in the Ur with Tumim and he foretold the future. He knew what would be in the future. Later on, the Nevi'im would tell you, they would look into the future. At Soifim, they look into the future, and they can predict what would happen with great accuracy. He said, what about, he says, today? He said, today, we don't have any of these strengths, he says. And he says, everybody still has within themselves an Urim V'Tumim. If you only can get through all the layers to that true voice that is inside yourself, it is the honest voice, because there are a lot of false voices that sound very, very real, and we usually have a tendency to follow those. So he said, you have to find the true voice. If you find the true voice within, that should guide you. He says, what? He says, that, how will I know? He says, this is how you'll know. He gave me a hint. He said to him, if you get up in the morning and you go out to do your day's work, and you come home at night and you feel fulfilled, and you are happy during the day and fulfilled at night, and you're fulfilled to the extent that you have found chen in the eyes of people, and when you lie down on your pillow and say Kriya Shema al Amita, you feel that you are in pretty good shape for the Rabbanu Shalom Kaviyachol. Seichel Toy Ve'enei Elokim V'Yodam. He said, then you're doing the right things. That's your tafkid. That's your task. That was a wonderful lesson. It's a wonderful lesson in guidance. I saw later on, the Goyen says something like this. I mean, all of these things are taken from Torah. The Goyen says, Chanoicha na'al pidarkoi, educate the young according to their nature. The derech of the Goyen says, everybody has a nature, and everybody has certain strengths that are very unique to that individual. Your tafkid in life is to find out those strengths, to maximize your potential in the areas where you can, and to serve the Rabbanu Shalom with it. David HaMelech was a he was a Naad Moini. He was a ruddy little boy, a handsome little boy, and he was Madim. Madim is warrior. He was by nature a warrior, but he used his strength to serve the Eibishter. He says, whatever you are, you find your strength, and you use that in the service of Hashem. So when he told him this, Hashem told him this, he said, this is Taka the Derech. And that's when he started going around and doing things. So the first thing he did was, when he saw these poor people, he'd helped a lot of people, but he said, these people are not being helped, so they need someone. So he started to go to the prisons. He found tremendous sipuk in this. I mean, I once went with him, and it was years later already, and we went to the Russian Platz there, the Russian compound. There were no jails there anymore, but they still had some things that they did, some administrative things. They certainly, under the British, they did, but this was much later. But the involvement that he had with those prisoners that were there was an amazing one. They would do anything, not to in any way embarrass him. And there were people there that would say, one of the people testified that he said, one of the people who was a prisoner there, a criminal. And he said, when we were in jail, he said, and then Rabbi used to come to visit us, we knew there were no ulterior motives. He just came because somebody cared about us. It meant so much to us. We thought we were thrown away. We were the dregs of society. He came, he made us feel like human beings. So there was one man there that he laughed at Yiddishkeit, and he mocked every religious thing, and he said negative things to every pious person. Suddenly he says, "Hey, wait a minute." He says, "I got to find my yarmulke, my kippah." He says, "What's going on here?" He said, "What happened suddenly? You converted? You became frum? What is this? You're Haredi? What did you do?" He didn't use that term in those days. I'm undating myself. So he said, he went, and he said, "This is ridiculous. Of course I'm not." He said, "But Rabbi Aryeh is coming today." He said, "And I don't want to see him me without a yarmulke." Bothered him. See, nobody ever told him this. Bothered him. I had this story and another story. With my Zayda was once walking in the street, and he saw a man. He said, "Oh, Shalom Aleichem, how are you?" And he said, "Slicha." He said, "Kvod Harav." He says, "I'm only kippah." So my Zayda said, "Listen," he says, "I didn't want you to see me," he said, "without a kippah." He said, listen, he says, I'm a very short man. He says, so I can't see what's on your head, he said, but I can see what's in your heart. Yeah? And that changed his life. There were little things like that that showed his caring for people, which went beyond anything that anybody would ever imagine. You know, these are the stories that are known, but someone told us a story, and my brother told it to me. A man came over, he was the head of a very large institution, and a very, very prominent institution. I won't tell you what it is, but just know, anonymous. So he said to him, he said, I want to tell you this story because your grandfather, he said, Yahrzeit, he said, changed my life. He said, I was a little boy and I went to the yeshiva. I went to Eitz Chaim yeshiva. And they served lunches there. So every day they served lunch, and it was whatever they served, the poor fare that they had. It was poverty years. He said, but there was one day I waited for the whole week. He says, I was Nebuchadnezzar Yosim. He says he was an orphan. One day I couldn't wait. He said, Erev Shabbos they would always serve chocolate pudding for dessert. He said, and I waited for the chocolate pudding. I couldn't wait to taste the chocolate pudding. That was special. He says, so I went to get my chocolate pudding, and it was this naughty boy. He went, and he took my chocolate pudding, and he spilled that out on the ground. He said, he ruined my treat I was waiting for the whole week. So I got up, I said, what did you do? So this boy ran over to the teacher and said, he spilled my chocolate pudding. He blamed me for what he did. So the teacher said, shame on you. Why did you spill? I said, but, she wouldn't listen to me. He said, I got so upset. He said, at the injustice, there was a table with all the chocolate puddings on them, standing on them, on it. He said, I went up to the front, I turned over the table, and I ruined all the chocolate puddings. And they suspended me. I came home, why, Nebuch, the people he was boarding with, awful, terrible. He was suspended from the yeshiva. And they told me I can't come back in, I have to stay out the rest of the week. I can't come back in unless the mashgiach, which was my Zayda, unless the mashgiach gives the okay for me to come back. He said at the end of the week I came back, he said, nah, I was disgraced. What was I going to do here? But it wasn't my fault. Now, I had such mixed feelings of injustice, but then again I did something stupid and bad. What was going to happen here? So he said, so I came in and Yahrzeit walked out. And he took me into his little room there that he had, and he sat down with me, and he said, now, he says, will you please tell me what happened? Nobody asked me what happened. Nobody would listen to me. So I told him the entire story of what happened. So he looked at me and he said, I totally do understand what made you so upset. I would have been upset too. He said, I don't know if I would have done what you did. Maybe I would have even. He said, but I totally do understand. He said, but you realize, he said, that what you did was a very poor response. He said, you don't respond with multiplying the negative, right? In response. That's not a response. The response should always elevate you and make you better. So he said, do you understand that? He said, yes, I do. He said, wonderful. He said, what does that mean? He said, that means I'll never do it again. He says, and I understand that I should try and respond in a positive way. He said, isn't that wonderful? He said, that's the halacha of a Baal Tshuva. He says, a Baal Tshuva is misvade. He tells you what he did wrong. He took halacha. The Rambam, he says, Baal Tshuva is misvade. He says a virui for his chet. He tells you what he did wrong, and he pledges he will never do this again. He says, I will never do this ever again. Right? And he said, and when it comes, he doesn't do it anymore. He says, so you are in a bechina of a Baal Tshuva. He said, he said, so now you're back in yeshiva again. You're a Baal Tshuva, and it's wonderful, and you're better than you were before because you learned a lesson. He says, now, he said, I want to give you a special gift. He says, you deserve a bonus for being so honest and forthright. He said, Ani agid lachem. He said, Ich will the Eichet. He said, in Yiddish. He spoke in Yiddish. He said, Ich will, I want to be authentic here. We're all covered to Dr. Peltz. I want to be emes here. How my Zeta said it. He said, respect for you. He said, Ich will dir erzählen, ist du es mit mir erzählt das Sod, und du hast sich vertraut in mir, you trusted me. He said, weil ich eigentlich dir erzählen das Sod, aber du tust es nicht erzählen zu kein anderen. You shouldn't tell it to anybody else. So he said, all right. He's sharing rid of a secret. He says, he went over to a cabinet, and he said, ich hab sehr lieb chocolate pudding. And he took out 2 chocolate puddings from the cabinet. He gave him one, and he took one. They both made shahakal, and they both sat down and ate. He said, that changed my life. He said, when I saw that, he said, I wasn't the same person anymore after that. He said, changed his life. You never know what kind of a meeting or some chance thing. Now, I just want to tell you another. I have a few minutes. I don't want to overstay my welcome, but just a few more minutes, because this story is very meaningful to me, because it has tremendous meaning for today, even. Especially with our world today, which has become so meshuggah. It was the second year or so of Atzmaut, of freedom for the establishment of the state of Israel. That's when I was in my alma mater, and I was in my alma mater, Yeshivas Beis Aryeh. I called my alma mater. It was the Mami Yeshiva to me, and it was Yom Ha'atzmaut. So I was going to go down. Big festivities going on in the street. What was the street then? The street was, you couldn't go to the old city. The whole street was Rehov Yafo. And they used to show movies. And in the street they showed cartoons. They brought out some projectors, showed cartoons. And J&F films. That was how they celebrated. And then people danced horrors. They came from all the kibbutzim, and they danced the big horror in the middle of the street. They lit a bonfire. They did all these, they had lakas, and they did all these wonderful things. L'koved Yom Ha'atzmaut. Okay? So, I thought, should I go, should I not go? I'm an American, but I'm not. I want to be a Rishomi, you know? Anyway, and I didn't know how they would look upon it, because, you know, a lot of the religious people didn't like this kind of stuff. They weren't girish this kind of business. So, especially the horror dancing, that's certainly not. They used to say, "Kanain horror." Yerushalmi used to say, "Kanain horror." That's what horror, Kanain horror. So anyway, so I stayed in the yeshiva. So I said, maybe I should just sneak down and see what's going on. And then, so I walked down the stairs, and I saw one of the rabbis there that I knew from the neighborhood. One of the Yidden. He said, "Who gave they?" So where are you going? I said, I'm going to see me the Kofrim? He said, don't go there. You don't go there. So I said, no. I said, for me, no, bro. You stay away. That's not your place. You used to go to the yeshiva, learn some Musa, learn this. Don't go there. I didn't know what to do. So I went back to the yeshiva, and now I know what the proper social approach is to this festivity, okay, to the Saturnalia, as he described it. He didn't know the name, but that's what he described, you know. The banquet of Tremalchio, you know, it is one of the big orgies of history is going on down there in Rehov Yafo. By being generally in Rehov Yafo, there are terrible things happening. Anyway, my Zeta comes into the yeshiva, and he says, Yitzchak, he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm learning the Sefer. He says, don't you want to see what's going on in the Gaza? I said, yeah. And he said, so why didn't you go? He said, I'm afraid. I went down, and I said, this Yid, and he told me not to go down, and I said, it's wrong, and it. So my Zeta said, it's Kedai to see you come from so far away. It's Kedai to see you. He said, come with me. And he walked with me all the way down the street there, and we went out and we came out. And we saw there were cartoons going on, people dancing in the streets there. And my Zeta looked at me, and my Zeta said to me, I didn't understand the impact of this at the time. But as I thought about it, it had tremendous impact. It made a tremendous impact on us. He said, look how Yidden, he said, are happy with being in Eretz Yisrael, with having their own place in Eretz Yisrael again. He said, look at the simcha. He said, look at the simcha and the joy. And he stood with me for a few minutes. We stood like about 2-3 minutes. He said, well, now it's time to go back to the yeshiva. And we went back. But what I didn't realize was, when my Zeta was standing there, he was uncomfortable. I didn't often see him being uncomfortable. He was not comfortable with a bunch of people standing around in preacher sticker clothes. But, you know, there was a story that somebody told. I'll just tell you about the tznius of my Zeta. He was so medagdik in modesty and in everything of that sort. And yet, he never did this at the expense of kavod of another person, of kavod abrius. Someone told us this story as well. He was on a bus and they were going to the hospital, and my Zeta was on the bus and he was sitting, and there was a lady standing. He got up, he stood up, and he said, they said, Rabbi, we haven't come to the hospital yet. He said, no, I'm getting off at this stop. He said, I have to do something here. And he got off at that stop, and that stop was right before a big hill. And then later, the person went to the hospital, and they saw my Zeta climbing up the hill. They said, why did he do that? So they nudged him, he didn't want to say. But finally, he explained to them what it was. He said he saw that the person sitting next to him, who he was sitting next to, and it was a man. He got up and he saw there was a lady and she was not dressed very tzniistic, young lady, and he figured out already she was going to sit down in the seat next to him. And it didn't pass for him to sit next to this lady who's sitting there with tznius. So he didn't want to embarrass her and make her feel that maybe he got up because he didn't want to sit next to her or something, because that's not the reason. The reason is because he is a person who's very fastidious about how people look at him and is a role model. So therefore he got up a seat earlier and made sure that he said he has to get up, and he got out of the bus, walked up the hill in order not to take away the kavod of a person, but not to disturb his own modesty. So I knew he was a person who was very nizar in his own tzidkes, in his own righteousness. He was very fastidious in the way he behaved. You know, they went to Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, who was the opposition to Rav Kook, and they tried to say negative things about my Zeta. So he said to them, I don't believe this. He said, why? He said, because Aryeh is Yireh. The oasis of Aryeh is Yireh, and Yireh is Aryeh. Everyone knew he was a very upgated person. I realized that he himself would never have gotten in these festivities, because he went in parades, he went to this, he went to that, he went to see people, but that was all in the doing the commission of his work. But to go and stand and watch people dancing in the heart of it, this was not his thing. And it was not his place, it was not his makom. And he didn't feel at home there. But to teach his Einik a lesson, without having to tell him, to teach me not to be a negative person, to see the positive in things, he was ready to do this. But then he said, okay, we learned the lesson, let's go. And the lessons come back over the years. The lessons come back and reiterate themselves and retell themselves over and over and over again. I remember walking with it just. I should add a little to it. He had a tremendous sense of humor, and I'd always like to tell the two stories. One story that I'm sure I've told 1,000 times already, but it bears telling. We were walking the street, and he said to me, "What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do?" And I said, "What do you mean, Zayd?" He said, "You want to be a Rav, you want to be a Rosh Hashiva, you want to be a printer. What do you want to do for a living?" So I said, I don't know if I'll be able to achieve those things. He said, "I want to be an Elach Yid, I want to be an honest Jew." So he started to laugh. I said, "Why are you laughing, Zayda?" So he took me over to the kiosk there where all the papers were displayed, the newspapers were all displayed. And he said, "Now look at all these papers. This one, it says he's a great general. This one, it says he's a doctor. This one, it says he's a Rav. This one is a tzaddik. This one." It doesn't say on anybody there, Elach Yidin. He said, "That's the hardest thing of all to be." He says, "It's the hardest thing of all to be." He said, "My kid," he said, "you picked the hardest task in the world." He was right. The hardest thing to be is an Elach Yid. Now, I'll end with a funny story. It's a funny story. I could, as Alta Diamond, Hol HaShalom used to say, and the Young Israel, I'm quoting something in the Lower Married Synagogue from the Young Israel, in the spirit of my Zayda. The old time Young Israel. I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I won't. He's a nice man, Mr. Diamond. Anyway, we were good friends. Every night I would go with my Zayda, and he gave a shiur to Balabatim in Knesset Yisrael. So I would walk with him along what is today Reb Aryeh. I would walk with him along that little street, and we would go to Knesset Yisrael. We would daven Mincha, and then he would give the shiur, and we would daven Ma'ariv, and we would give the shiur. And he gave the shiur Masechta Gittin. I learned Gittin that year with my Zayda. He taught Gittin to Balabatim. So it was a long day. The Balabatim were all tired, but they came to the shiur. But there was one old man, Reb Mordechai Zeichat Tzadik Levrach. He was a wonderful, sweet old man. He was very nearsighted. And he would sit by the Gemara, and it was a long day, and he would fall asleep. So this is how he would sit. He would go like this, and he would go. Now, when he looked at the Gemara, the way he would look at the Gemara was, when he started out, he would go like this. And he would look right into the Gemara, and then he would go up, and he would go back, and everybody looked at it. Nobody said anything about it. We never commented on it. That would not have been nice. But everybody saw it, and everybody noticed it because it was very noticeable and very funny. And then his head would go back, and then he would go like this. And everybody, I thought I was the only one, but people stopped paying attention. And we were all waiting to see if his nose would ever hit it. You know? Of course, my Zayda was going on in the Gemara, and he was telling stories and learning and going on in the Gemara. And he didn't see any of this. He was busy learning Gemara and Rashi and that. And he didn't see any of this. And we all stopped, and we're watching this scene, this tableau that goes on. Oh, Reb Mordechai geht schon schlafen. Reb Mordechai's going to sleep. Well, one guy would look at the other. There was one man that would look at the other and he'd say, "Ay, lulu." Oh, Reb Mordechai. We would all look at Reb Mordechai. And his face keeps going down. Anyway, he always somehow stopped before he hit the table. Amazingly, you see, the Eibishter Shalom Tzarem Hashem, the Eibishter watched out for him. A funny story. One night, my Zayda was learning a particularly difficult Tosfos there with a Balabatim, and suddenly Reb Mordechai goes bang. He finally hit the table. The eagle has landed. Everybody was, let's see what that. Reb Mordechai hit the table. So you know what happened? It's really funny. Don't leave it. See, mitzvah gereres mitzvah. Thank you. my Zayda finished the Tosfos. Everybody said it. Everyone, no one said anything. But he turned around and he looked at Reb Mordechai. He said, "Ay, nebach Reb Mordechai, hast wehgetan on dein nose? Du darfst da tichale?" He said, "Poor Reb Mordechai," he said, "did you hurt your nose?" He said, "Can I give you my handkerchief?" Reb Mordechai said, "No." He said, "That's better." And we all had, we realized all the time while he was learning the Tosfos and everything else, he saw everything that was going on. And he saw every single person that was laughing. And he saw how we all reacted. And I came out afterwards and I said to him, "Zayda," I said, "you really mean you?" He says, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I was waiting for it to see if his nose went." I was waiting to see. He said, Baruch Hashem. He said, "I prayed only one thing, that when he bangs his nose," that's why I took an extra handkerchief. If he finally bangs his nose, I said, he shouldn't hurt himself. And Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Anyway, you measure a person by how he responds to all the little things in life. Because the big things everyone responds, but the little things are precious and dear and wonderful. And those are wonderful memories. And I'm zeicher to talk about my Zayda. Absolutely not. And I'm embarrassed even to try and do so. However, I will thank the Rebbeinu Shalom forever for the schus of being able to live in the shadow of such wondrous people. I've had great joy in life, some great joys in life. I've had the joy of having the most wonderful marriage in the world, and to me, the most wonderful family, Kanain Hara. And all of you are the most wonderful shul. My father used to say, "You'll never find you invented Fuselberg." And then when he came the first time to the Lower Merion Synagogue, he said to me, Rabbi Yitzchak, he said, "I don't know how you did it." He said, "I never thought you would find a place where you would fit in." He said, "But you fit in there." He said, you found your Fuselberg. And I found my Fuselberg. Baruch Hashem. I want to tell you, thank you, Rabbi Shalom, for helping me find, for raising me in a home of Gedolim, where there's no arrogance and no gaiva, and you know your place. You're sitting at the feet of tzaddikim, and you're able to just take joy from other people, not envy or covet or narishkeit or nonsense, but just to take full joy that you can from other people. And thank you for Rabbi Shalom for giving me such a wondrous and marvelous kehillah, a real Fuselberg of my own. It's wonderful. I look forward to even the Fuselberg Shalmala. That'll be wonderful. Meet all the old people that many of you don't even know. Many of you do. Wonderful people. We should all be zoiche to see the top and the bottom come together. Shamayim and Aretz, v'noichal shom min azvachim, u'min ha'psochim, min ha'psochim, u'min ha'zvachim. Amen.
Don't forget Yiddy.
Yes, I'm thinking of Yuri too. Yes, I know. I'm thinking of Yuri too. He's Gadal, Shmir.